He bought a quiet home, but a collapsing driveway revealed a dark secret. What lay beneath his suburban house would rewrite history and expose a truth that had been buried for decades. You won't believe. Michael Harper, a man weary of his 42 years spent in the city's relentless grind, found himself dreaming of quiet, the constant blare of horns, the suffocating exhaust, the endless cycle of work at his auto shop. It had all chipped away at his very soul. He longed for a sanctuary, a place where silence wasn't a luxury but the very air he breathed. And then, as if by a miracle, he stumbled upon it. An old two-story house in a sleepy suburb, offered at a price that made his heart leap. Peeling paint, overgrown garden, cracked driveway. Others might have seen ruin, but Michael saw possibility, a canvas for a new life, an escape. He barely noticed the seller's nervous haste, the darting eyes, the almost desperate rush to close the deal. He was too consumed by the dream of mornings without traffic, nights without shouting, only the gentle whisper of wind through trees. When those keys finally rested in his palm, the city's heavy burden seemed to lift, and for the first time in forever, he truly believed he could build a home. But the peace was fleeting, a fragile veil over something deeply unsettling. It began with the driveway, those spiderweb cracks that seemed to deepen with each passing day, and then the sound, a faint shifting, a muted scrape from beneath the concrete, a ghostly whisper carried through the floorboards at night. Michael, a man of logic and steel, dismissed it as an old house settling, the earth groaning. Yet the whispers persisted, a rhythmic brushing against metal that defied explanation. One night, his curiosity overpowering his reason, he crept to the window. Nothing, only the still garden, the silent driveway, motionless shadows. But the echo of that sound resonated in his chest, a warning he couldn't name. The seller's trembling hands, his evasive gaze when asked about the property's past. It all flooded back. Was it just an old man seeking a new life? Or was something sinister buried here? Michael tried to ignore it, pouring his energy into renovations. Each repaired window, every weed pulled, was a declaration, this is mine now. But the driveway, that uneven expanse beneath his boots, continued its silent protest, the cracks growing wider, deeper. The whispers intensified, a persistent, unsettling cadence that tightened a knot of tension in his gut. He kept his unease to himself, smiling through forced conversations with neighbors, pretending his new haven was nothing more than a house. But as twilight painted the horizon one evening, a chill swept through him. The city hadn't merely followed him, it had manifested in a new, more insidious form, a silence heavy with untold secrets. Had his life truly changed, or did every transformation carry its own dark shadows? He couldn't have known then that the murmurs beneath his feet weren't just the house breathing. They were the stirring of a hidden truth, a secret so profound, his casual daily crossings of the driveway would soon rip it wide open. The peace he craved would shatter, replaced by a revelation waiting patiently in the dark. That truth, a living thing, stirred even then, listening to his every step, the rhythm of his unsuspecting life. Oh, how the house had been waiting for him. The uneasy rhythm continued until one pale dawn. Climbing into his old truck, Michael started the engine, a familiar comfort, but as he shifted into reverse, a jarring lurch, the rear tires stubbornly held fast. Then with a terrifying groan, the wheel dropped. His stomach flipped. The driveway was failing, heart hammering. He scrambled out. What a sight! A concrete paver had utterly collapsed, revealing a shallow, unnatural hollow. He crouched, fingers tracing the jagged edges, loose earth, disturbed. A flicker of metal caught his eye deep within the gap. His breath hitched. Not stone, not roots, man-made, rusted, yet undeniably there. Logic screamed old pipe, but a deeper instinct whispered, no, this is deliberate, something buried. The nocturnal scrapes replayed in his mind, leading him to this very moment. He dug frantically, exposing more of the rough, pitted metal. It wasn't a scrap, it was a structure, unyielding, deeply embedded. He pulled and pried until his muscles burned, but it wouldn't budge. Why here? Why so loose? Why deliberately filled? The questions screamed louder than any answer. He imagined sinkholes, his house crumbling, a terrifying abyss. He shook his head, but the unease clung to him like a shroud. The day at the shop passed in a fog. Every clang, every engine roar, muffled by the gnawing mystery of his driveway. That evening, as shadows lengthened, he returned. The metal glinted faintly. He pressed his hand to the soil, crumbling. Too easy. Refilled. Someone had dug here. Curiosity warred with caution. Trouble? Expense? Legal nightmares? Yet an undeniable pull, a yearning for answers, overrode all fear. This wasn't maintenance. This was destiny. With a small trowel he began to dig. Damp, dark clumps of soil gave way, revealing a wide, flat metal surface. Not a pipe, but a deliberate rectangular structure, its edges too precise to be natural. The earth itself seemed to resist, each handful of dirt, a prying open of a forbidden secret. The quiet deepened, broken only by his breath and the scrape of the trowel. When he finally leaned back, sweat cooling on his brow, his instincts were confirmed. This was no accident. The cracks, the sounds, the collapse, all orchestrated. Something waited beneath his home. Darkness enveloped the yard, but Michael couldn't deny it any longer. He gathered his tools, vowing to think clearly in the morning. Yet his eyes kept drifting to that breathing hollow. The secret was calling him deeper. That night, the sounds returned, clearer now, the unmistakable scrape of something shifting below. This wasn't imagination. The earth beneath his home was speaking, and he knew with chilling certainty he would answer. The next morning, the hatch consumed his thoughts. No dream. The rusted handle, the groaning metal, the cold, damp air, all terrifyingly real. The house's silence was no longer peaceful. It was watchful. He moved on autopilot, coffee tasteless, newspaper unread, his heartbeat echoing the undeniable presence of the hatch. He couldn't last the day. He had to return. Outside, the cool, dew-kissed air felt charged. The scarred driveway lay before him, a grim invitation. He knelt, fingers brushing the exposed metal. It was a hatch, hinges, stiff with corrosion, and then a handle, almost invisible, fused by time, yet undeniably there. His breath caught. Decades, hidden, sealed, waiting for this moment. A shiver ran down his spine. Who built this? Why buried? He circled the opening, studying the deliberately concealed earth. The cellar. Had he known? Had he buried this truth under layers of cement and silence? Michael placed his hands on the cold, rough handle, pulling with all his might. It groaned. A low, spine-tingling creak, but held fast. He strained, muscles burning, but the earth clung to its secret. He let go, chest heaving. Foolish to meddle, perhaps, but the hatch, its outline imprinted on his soul, pulled him with a force stronger than reason. He, Michael Harper, was meant to find this. The day blurred into an anxious haze. Every sound at the shop, every quiet moment, brought him back to that rusted handle. By sundown, resistance was few. Crowbars, a hammer. He seized them, returning to the driveway with the possessed steps of a man on a mission. He pried, each motion releasing a musty breath of damp earth. Slowly, the rectangular outline emerged. Undeniable, he wedged the crowbar, pressed with all his weight. A long moment of nothing, then a sharp, terrible crack. The hatch shifted, lifting a fraction of an inch. Cold, damp air, thick with the scent of stone and decay, rushed out. His stomach clenched. He peered into the darkness, a flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. A ladder, corroded, but intact, descending into an abyss, a passage into something deliberately hidden. His hands trembled. He told himself not to go down. Dangerous, reckless, but walking away, impossible. He had opened the door to the past, and it was screaming to be heard. That night, the hatch haunted his every closed eye. The ladder, the shadows, the heavy air, the suffocating silence. And beneath it all, that faint, clear scrape, as if the earth itself held its breath, waiting. Michael knew. He had crossed a threshold. His driveway was no longer mere concrete. It was an entryway into a forgotten world. The secret was out, and he would descend. The silence of his new home was shattered, forever. The next morning the hatch was no dream, The rust, the groan, the cold air, all chillingly real. The house watched him now. His routine was automatic, his heart pounding with inevitability. He gathered his supplies, heavy-duty flashlight, rope, toolkit, dust mask. He secured the rope, a lifeline to the world above, and with a grunt, pulled the hatch open wider. A screech echoed across the yard. Cool, damp air, thick with earth and rust, enveloped him. He lowered himself onto the ladder. The first rung groaned, but held. Down he went, into the absolute silence. The pale glow of the hatch mouth, shrinking above. The walls, brick slick with moisture, seemed to swallow him. Cobwebs clung to corners, the air growing colder with each step. He shone his light, an earthen floor. A small rectangular chamber, reinforced with brick and concrete, curved inward, as if the earth itself embraced it. His breath caught. Old newspapers, yellowed and brittle, crumpled in a corner. Rusted tin cans collapsed and corroded, lined a wall. Shattered glass bottles. And on the far fall, uneven strokes of black, wait, night, fear, repeated, crossed out, circled. Not vandalism, messages of desperation. He imagined lanterns flickering, whispered prayers, the frantic pacing of frightened souls. A chill ran down his spine. He searched further, earth soft under his boots, remains of bedding, rotted fabric, empty jars. This was a shelter, a place of enduring fear. Not just curiosity, but a profound sorrow welled within him, for these forgotten people. Then a small metal box, half buried. He dug it free. Inside, brittle papers, a child's handkerchief with faint initials, left in haste, perhaps never to return. The weight of it was unbearable. The chamber wasn't empty. It was filled with echoes, with silent voices. He had seen enough. This was no ordinary cellar. This was a refuge of desperation, deliberately sealed away. Emerging into the bright sun, the world above felt unreal. He closed the hatch, hands trembling. His home was not what he'd believed. Beneath lay a story, decades old, demanding to be understood. The chamber was just the beginning. The secret had revealed itself, and Michael couldn't turn away. The underground chamber left him restless. The cold silence seeped into his bones. The words on the wall, the tiny handkerchief, evidence of frightened, waiting lives. He felt he'd stumbled into a deliberately buried chapter of history, a chapter carrying voices like his own. Wait, night, fear, haunting his sleep. The silence of his house now felt heavy, pregnant with a story. He needed answers. Who built it? Why hidden? What happened to them? The library, smelling of old paper, became his starting point. He pored over brittle documents, faded photos, World War II, bombings, ration lines, Anderson shelters. But his chamber was different, larger, sturdier, communal. What truly unsettled him was the absence in the archives. Praise for resilience, but barely a whisper of the black workers brought in. An omission, erasure. Then a yellowed clipping from 1942, a temporary settlement for laborers, black families, living on the margins, their humanity stripped away. Anger and sorrow surged. They needed shelter, but where? The answer echoed from his driveway. They built their own, hidden, forgotten. The town records, maps of property lines. His house, built in the 70s, stood on an empty plot, adjacent to that settlement. The pieces clicked. A communal shelter, buried. His home atop an erased story. He spoke to elderly residents. Most remembered little, but one silver-haired woman, eyes sharp, recalled families at the town's edge. Children, women, weary men. And then her voice softened. They weren't welcome in the official shelter. They simply disappeared from sight, until the danger passed. His heart ached. Disappeared from sight. It fit too perfectly. They had vanished into the earth, into his chamber, their fear and resilience sealed in brick and stone. This wasn't just history. It was his history, his heritage. People who shared his skin, his struggle. He imagined them, digging with bare hands, building sanctuary for their children, because no one else would. Pride and sorrow, a deep recognition of their strength. Late one night, surrounded by papers, the weight settled. The chamber, a monument to forgotten lives, deliberately buried. The previous owner must have known. Shame, indifference, but now the earth had given way. The truth had risen. He closed his notebook, the driveway sealed, but no longer silent. He couldn't stop. The chamber hadn't finished speaking. It had more to tell, if only he dared to keep digging, and he knew he would. This quest for truth was a responsibility, a duty to the voices etched in those walls. They had waited long enough. Through him, their story would rise. His driveway was now alive, pulsing with echoes. He walked over the cracked pavers, imagining families huddling below, listening to bombs, sirens, children, mothers, men, waiting. His house was theirs now too, layered with lives. He had to return. The chamber was only a fragment. He was certain another room, another story, lay hidden. One evening, under a muted gold sky, he descended again. This time, no hesitation. His flashlight found it. Uneven bricks in a corner. A sealed passage. His heart quickened, hammer and chisel, each strike a thunderous echo, dust rising, air thick. He wasn't destroying, he was releasing. A brick tumbled. A gap. More brick walls. More space. He widened the opening, slid through on his stomach. A second, larger chamber, damp, still. His light swept, and he froze. Objects, untouched for decades. A small wooden doll, faded paint. A crooked tin soldier, a tangled necklace, its pendant glinting faintly. Personal things, fragments of lives left in haste. He picked up the doll, imagined a child's comfort in the dark. The necklace, a daily keepsake, memory, love. He turned it in his hand, and for a moment he felt the weight of its story pressing into him. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a home. Then a book, warped cover, crumbling edges, a diary, pages fragile but legible, uneven, hurried handwriting, sirens, rushed to the earth, nights of fear, distant bombs, whispered prayers, crying children, shared food, long waits for silence. The words struck him to his core, voices pressing through the ink. One entry, exclusion, official shelters denied, bitterness, building their own refuge, hiding from bombs and judgment, confirmation. The story of people pushed to the margins, refusing to be broken. He read for hours, light trembling, tears blurring, grief and pride. He had found not just evidence, but voices, demanding to be heard. Climbing back into the night, stars spread wide, he felt profoundly changed. History pressed on his shoulders. A calling. The doll, the necklace, the diary, all must be preserved, shared, remembered. They deserved more than silence. Recognition, dignity, remembrance. He stood in the driveway, staring at the hatch. It was no longer empty, quiet. It was filled with echoes of laughter, fear, love, resilience. He heard them now with his heart. He would carry them forward. The past had spoken. He wouldn't let it fade. Days blurred. Work felt different. Every clang, every pause, echoed the diary, the huddled families. How to explain his home? A forgotten sanctuary. Erased stories. Silence was no longer an option. The chambers weren't his secret. History didn't belong buried. Anger at the previous owner, who'd covered it, but deeper obligation. Those voices had trusted him. He wouldn't betray them. He tried his neighbors. Some listened politely, others with discomfort or skepticism. Leave the past in the past. One muttered. Don't stir division, frowned another. He didn't yield. Their reluctance fueled his resolve. The local historical society, a representative, a woman with sharp eyes and a notebook, she gasped. When he led her down, shining his light on the words, the artifacts, undeniable. She promised documentation, preservation, but Michael wanted more, alive, visible, accessible, children to feel the weight of fear and hope, people to read the diary, hold the doll, history, immediate, rooted in their soil. Evenings he cleaned, cleared, reinforced, each shovel full an offering, the diary in a case, objects arranged, sacred remnants, the chambers transformed into a memorial. News spread, a reporter, then TV crews, the rusted hatch, the ladder, the damp walls. Dismissive neighbors returned. Their expressions softened, voices hushed. Some apologized, others just stared at the words. Finally hearing, Michael remained steady, not for the cameras, but for the voices. The story finally being told, he spoke of families denied safety, of resilience, of the injustice of erasure, pride, not just sorrow, heroes of survival, Officials resisted, citing costs, safety, fear of stirring division. Seal it again? Never, Michael wrote. Attended, spoke with conviction. History wasn't comfortable. Remembering was necessary. His words, weighted with personal truth, broke the silence. One afternoon, with school children, he watched their eyes widen at the words. The doll, the diary, their teacher explained, and Michael felt it. Hope, the voices of the past, speaking for the young, refusing to be forgotten. When the designation came, his heart was steady, the hatch no longer a burden but a doorway into memory. He touched the handle with reverence. The diary, the toy, the necklace, fear, resilience, silence, survival. His house, but everyone's story. He hadn't sought it, but it found him. He had honored it. The voices, once whispers in the dark, were free. They would not fade. As the sun set, Michael listened to the quiet, no longer empty, filled with presence, echoes, memory. A chorus of voices, no longer waiting in fear, but standing proudly in the light of remembrance. He had fulfilled his role as their keeper. The story lived. It would endure.